In the early to mid 2000s, much of the sales research that we were engaged in at what was then called the Sales Executive Council as part of the Corporate Executive Board became really almost world famous, and in many ways was world famous, at least among B2B sales professionals, for its focus on sales coaching and some profoundly important and really interesting findings that came out of our research shop on what world-class B2B coaching looks like. And for a time, kind of everybody in the profession knew those findings. And since then, well, we've all kind of moved on and many different things have happened. And of course, in our shop, we got focused on the challenger work for a number of years and then buyer enablement and sense making. And just the years go by and things happen. And I thought I'd just take a moment to bring us back to at least one graph, one set of data that turned out to be not only critically important then, but I think is still critically important today. So one of the things we were trying to do is map out the impact of sales coaching from first-line sales managers on their direct reports, that is, sales professionals. And what we found, we ultimately drew as a performance curve. But you would think if you were to draw a performance curve of sales reps from bottom decile to top decile, so across 10% increments across a sales force, the distribution of that performance curve would look more or less like a bell curve, right? It would sort of peak in the middle, maybe skewed a little bit to the right, but not really. It's just kind of up and then back down again, and it'd be a relatively normal distribution. Now, if you were to apply sales coaching, so if let's just take the world as it is, here's the performance curve, and then you were to take all the sales managers who are managing the reps that appear in that performance curve, and you were to train them all on coaching and make them all better at coaching and move from sort of, mediocre to non-existent to maybe even just average level coaching to really sort of world-class coaching, what do you think would happen to that performance curve? Well, I think what most of us would think would happen to that performance curve of all those reps who are now receiving all that great coaching is that entire performance curve would shift to the right. So it'd be, here's our curve. I guess it kind of looks like a little bit like this. And the whole curve would shift to the right. In other words, everyone would get a little bit better. Whether you're a bottom decile, top decile, or sort of a core performing sales rep, coaching helps everybody equally. It's sort of democratic. But that's actually not what happens. What happens sort of graphically is fascinating. The whole curve, it doesn't shift to the right. It tips to the right. That is, the middle moves, but the feet don't. And that, I think, is really, really interesting. And what that tells us is a couple things. First of all, what it tells us is that, in fact, providing sales reps with world-class or even just better coaching, sort of top quartile coaching, will have a significant impact on core performers, sort of the middle 60% of your sales force, that middle of that bell curve, as it can significantly improve the performance, sometimes up to double-digit performance improvements on quota attainment for all of that middle, the big chunk of chunk's a weird word in this context, but the middle of the performance curve. But then, so that's the middle moves. But what about the feet don't? What does that mean? What that means is that no matter how good you get at coaching, let's take the bottom decile first, sort of the bottom 15% of your sales reps. What we found there is that no matter how good you get at coaching, there's very little you can do, at least through coaching, to improve the performance of those sales reps. And by the way, we filtered out rookie reps. This wasn't about being new in seat. And what you find there is that more often than not, this isn't a performance issue that can be solved through coaching. It's more of a fit issue that probably needs to be solved through other means, maybe a new job or a new role altogether. Meanwhile, over on the far right, that would be your top 10%, the star performers of your sales force. There, it's hard to use coaching to make your star performers that much more stellar. They're already really great. So the analogy we used to use at the time was back when Tiger Woods was great at golf, Tiger Woods is already pretty darn good at golf. And so you give Tiger Woods a world-class coach, maybe you can have a slight impact. Maybe you shave a stroke off his game here or there. But let's face it, there's diminishing returns on just how much more goodness you can extract from a star performer. So the big opportunity for incremental improvement is in the middle. Now, what do we take away from all that? Well, first of all, I think it's really interesting because when you take that finding and run it up against what actually happens in reality, you find almost the exact opposite, that first-line sales managers, and understandably, I think, have this tendency to gravitate to either star performers when it comes to coaching, because let's face it, it's a lot of fun coaching star performers, it's just being with star performers and, sharing your war stories and watching them work and talking about it. It becomes more like sort of just an opportunity. It's an experience. It's just a lot of fun, right? Or we gravitate likewise to the bottom of our performance curve because that's where all the pain is. That's if we're going to miss our territory performance goal, it's probably going to happen down there. So that kind of sucks our attention, and we get bogged down there trying to coach something that isn't frankly coachable. It's not to say that those individuals can't be helped, but it probably isn't through coaching alone or maybe at all. And so if nothing else, and the other way we tend to coach would be sort of almost like democratically. We spread our coaching time evenly like peanut butter across all of our sales reps. But this finding of the fact that the curve doesn't shift but tips tells us that actually we used to call this an end to the democracy of coaching or democratic coaching, where we spread our coaching efforts evenly like peanut butter. Rather, we should take those coaching efforts and focus them particularly and specifically on that middle 60%, because that's where the improvement, the big incremental gains can actually be had. Now, that said, we did find a benefit from coaching star performers. It wasn't around performance, it was around engagement, and particularly around retention. So you coach your stars for retention and you coach your core for performance. And for those in the bottom quartile, that's probably a performance conversation rather than a coaching conversation. And again, that's oftentimes about fit. It's not that they're bad people, it's just maybe they belong in a different role, and that's okay too. But this, I think, just that alone, that set of insights around one chart that didn't shift but tipped, turns out to be incredibly powerful for helping both sales enablement and sales leadership, and also just sales managers understand where to devote their time, where to devote their attention to get the most out of their coaching efforts. And hopefully that helps you too.